Take your Bibles. Turn to the Gospel of Mark. We continue to make our way through, and this is one of those, as all of these stories that we have been dealing with in the Gospel of Mark, truly amazing story. Mark chapter 4, the last paragraph in chapter 4, starting in verse 35. On that day, when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was. And other boats were with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so that the boat was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" And he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. He said to them, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" Heavenly Father, speak to us clearly today. A word of encouragement, a word of truth, a word of hope, and maybe a word, if necessary, of correction. In Jesus' name, amen. The longer you live, the more inevitable it is that you find the things that you do well and the things you don't do well. I eat well. I used to sleep well. I don't even do that as well anymore. And then there are things that I do very, very poorly. A couple weeks ago, we planned an excursion, an adventure. It was our one-day great adventure. When I was a kid, we had, my dad worked with a guy that on the weekends had a charter fishing boat that he would take out onto Lake Michigan out of St. Joe Harbor in Michigan and go fishing for salmon and lake trout out on the lake. And so I thought, you know what? My boys love to fish. I'm not a great fisherman, but they love to go fishing, and let's do something and make a memory this year. We did. We made a memory. Not the one I wanted. We got in the boat. We drove up to Algoma, Wisconsin, which is up near Door County, and we got there, and we're on the way up there, and we get a phone call. We're going to go out for 8 hours on the boat fishing for salmon and lake trout and steelhead trout, and we're on our way up, caught in some traffic, because we were supposed to go out at noon. We were going to be out for 8 hours, from noon until 8, and the captain of our ship called and said, "Hey, I'm curious, are you guys in town yet?" And we said, "No, we're on our way." He said, "Well, they're saying that some wind is going to blow in. There shouldn't be any storms, but there's going to be 14, 15 mile an hour winds that are going to blow in. And if we could get out on the lake earlier, we'll get some calmer seas, which makes it a little easier for us to catch what we want to before the seas kick up. We'll still go no matter what happens, but it'll be easier if we get out and get a couple extra hours early." So we did our best to get there. We got there maybe 45 minutes early. We loaded up, got onto the boat, and went out into Lake Michigan, several miles out from shore. It took us probably a half hour, 40 minutes to get to the fishing area where we're going to go, and things are going well. First couple hours go. It was kind of a light day. He said most of the other boats out that day in the morning had kind of a quiet day fishing. But then, as you hope for, we had those moments where we had about 14 rods out in the boat, and they take care of rigging it all up, and all of a sudden one of the rods jumps in. Austin's up first. He jumps up and he grabs it and he begins to reel and reel and reel. Eventually, he pulls in a really nice sized steelhead rainbow trout. And Bryant gets up and he gets the next one. And about the third time we got a fish on, it was my turn. I jumped up and I got it. But I'm not made to be on boats. Yeah. Somebody take me home now. we are out there in the middle of the boat, and I pull in my fish, a beautiful, massive lake trout. They call it Moby trout now, legendary on Lake Michigan after I caught that fish. But I brought my fish in, and then to help future fishing experiences and to help our team maybe draw in more fish, I decided to personally chum the waters. That was the first of multiple experiences hanging over the side of the boat for the rest of the trip. And as the day went on, the waves got bigger and bigger. I got greener and greener, sicker and sicker. I thought eventually I would get over it, but I did not. And about 5 o'clock, 2 to 3 hours earlier than planned, I pulled the plug. I said, I'm done. Take me in. I can't do it anymore. You know how humiliating it is to be the dad and you're the only one in the boat hanging over the edge? I had hoped that the first time, because in the past, if I get sick one time on a boat like that, usually I'm okay. Not so much this day. For the entire rest of the trip, I was violently ill the whole time on the side of the boat. So I have learned this. I will stick to my quiet, sedentary life, sitting in an office, studying ancient texts, and standing in front of congregations preaching the word. I will not. I have decided, contrary to all of my expectations, I have no future on deadliest catch as a crab fisherman on the Bering Sea. That part of my life is over. And so I am reminded as I think about my own experience on Lake Michigan in the last couple of weeks, I am reminded of what I can do and what I can't do. And I'm reminded that no matter how hard I try, sometimes you just come against your own limits and you just kind of have to pull the plug. And when I read this story, I mean, obviously there's a connection to my experience on the lake in the last couple weeks, but more than that, I think it's easy for us to think about following Jesus. I mean, literally, I'm not talking about in the figurative sense in our contemporary saying where we follow Jesus as followers of Christ. But I mean literally to be there, to be following Jesus. I mean, we'd all like to think we'd be like the disciples, right? I mean, that we followed him through thick and thin, and we kept focused, and we wouldn't. But I wonder, and I read this story, and I'll be honest with you, I wonder even more. Would I have been one that was just a part of the multitude? That listened to the stories, saw the miracles, ate the fish and the loaves. And yet, when Jesus moves on, they disperse. You know, we see moments where there's thousands of people surrounding Jesus. And at the end, he's in a garden praying by himself with Peter, James, and John, and they're all sleeping. Where would I have been? Would I have somewhere along the way cashed it in and pulled the plug and walked away? I think, honestly, this would have been one of those moments where I might have been tempted for a lot of reasons to do that. So the story goes. Jesus is in his home area, in the northern part of what would be Israel, along the Sea of Galilee and where he grew up. In fact, the Gospels refer to Capernaum as Jesus' town at this point. You know, his parents were from Nazareth. He was born in Bethlehem, spent some time in Egypt. But when he launches into public ministry, it seems that his center, home base, was the town of Capernaum. Taught in their synagogues, and it's a coastal. I say coastal. It's not the Mediterranean coastal or any of the great oceans, but it's coastal to the Sea of Galilee. And Capernaum was a fishing community. And that's where Jesus lived. It's where he called some of his disciples. It was his experience. And it's where the multitudes began to gather when he would teach, and he did miracles, and the sick were healed, and the lame began to walk, and all of these things have already now taken place. He's assembled the 12 around him. He's gathered the multitudes are there to see the miracles, to find hope, to get answers to the deepest struggles of their life. And it is now happening. Ministry is going forward. Jesus is beginning to experience some levels of opposition, but not like he will later. So great are the crowds on the occasion of this day that that Jesus goes out to the shore of the Sea of Galilee and begins to teach there. And the crowds keep pressing in. And we talked about this a couple weeks ago, that Jesus had to say to his disciples, get a boat. They're gonna force us into the sea. Let's get a boat. We'll shove out just a little bit from the shore, and I'll teach from the boat. And he spends an entire day in ministry, teaching, preaching, miracle. Literally, thousands of people have come to hear him and pressed in around him. He gets in a boat. Here's an amazing thing. Just a few years ago, during a time of great dryness in Israel, the Sea of Galilee, as during times of drought does, it went down. And two fishermen, amateur archaeologists, saw something poking up out of the mud and the muck from where the sea had receded. And they excavated it and discovered, right there in the area where Jesus lived and taught, a fishing boat that they've been able to date to within a matter of 50 years, plus or minus, the life and ministry of Jesus. They call it the Jesus boat, or the ancient Galilee boat. It's in a museum today. You can go see it. And it's typical of the boats of the time, and probably very much the boat that Jesus got in. It was about 27 feet long, made out of wood, about 7.5 feet wide, and the side of the boat came up about 4.5 feet, and it was a very flat-bottomed boat so that they could fish close to shore. And Jesus was on that boat. And if you think of a boat 27 feet long and 7.5 feet wide, that's the boat he's in, and he's in there with his disciples and the crew of the ship. Well, let's not call it a ship, the boat. And after an exhausting day of ministry, Jesus says, let's go on to the other side of the sea. And they shove off and they begin to go out in this relatively small boat, full. The maximum capacity they would guess on these boats was probably around 14 to 15 people, and there were 14 to 15 people on that boat. And they shove off and they say, let's go to the other side. So the boat that he's been teaching in now becomes his transportation, and Jesus and the disciples begin to go across the Sea of Galilee. But I personally have never been to Israel, but in studying and preparing for this day, I was struck by this reality. The Sea of Galilee is not a sea. It's actually a large lake. It's a freshwater lake, surrounded by hills and small mountains all the way around it. It is, in fact, we have lakes, inland lakes in Illinois, roughly the equivalent size of the Sea of Galilee. It's a large lake, but it's a lake that when you're on the shore, you can pretty much, if you just go up a little bit on one of the immediate rises in elevation on the shore, you can pretty much see across the entire lake. And so Jesus, when they said, let's go to the other side, this is what it was. It wasn't this great Columbus explorer moment. Let's go forward into the vast blue, the unknown across. No, Jesus goes, let's go over there. It wasn't a great luxury ocean liner, and it wasn't a 7-week pleasure cruise. It literally was probably a 3 to 5 mile journey that would take an hour to 2 hours across the lake. Ironically, though, if you look at depth charts of the Sea of Galilee, they were going over the absolute deepest part of the lake. So they're going across, getting into the evening. No doubt they see across, and Jesus has had an exhausting day of ministry, and he curls up in the back of the boat, where the person, the captain, the helmsman, would have directed the ship. And he curls up on that slight raised platform and he goes to sleep. And they say that on the Sea of Galilee, because of the way the hills frame it in, it is not uncommon for sudden and violent windstorms to come out of nowhere. All of a sudden, as Jesus, we're not talking hours We're not talking that Jesus was down in his cabin. No, just at the back of the boat. A matter of probably a half hour into the trip, maybe. All of a sudden, one of these violent windstorms sweeps across the waters of the Sea of Galilee. They can probably see their destination, but they begin to fear they're not going to make their destination. Waves rise. In fact, the waves begin to rise so high that those 4.5 feet that the walls come up, not sufficient, and the water begins to enter and break over the side of the boat, being tossed up and down. Now remember, these are fishermen, many of them. They spent their lives on that very body of water, in those very boats. They knew what the experience was like, and yet for all of their experience and all of their training and all of their life, that moment they knew they were in terrible danger. Their lives literally at risk. Their boat precariously taking on water. I don't know which one of the disciples it was according to this story, but one of them rouses Jesus from his sleep. I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming, we all got, Jesus was Son of God, perfect in all his ways, so I'm assuming he woke up well too, His hair was probably in good shape too. No, he probably was a man like every other man. Son of God, son of man. But yet, he's roused from his sleep after an exhausting day of ministry. And they say this: don't you care? Aren't you concerned that we're going to die? Well, there's a way to wake up. There's an alarm clock for your junior high right there. Get up, you're gonna die. And I've always read this when I've come across that phrase, don't you care we're going to die? I've always read it that had this tone to it, like, Jesus, you can fix this. Don't you get it? We're in great peril. Don't you care that we are going to die? I don't think that's really probably exactly what they were going for. Because they were really shocked when he does what he does. And they didn't request him to do what he did. What they're saying is, aren't you concerned that we, including you, are about to die? It wasn't so much that they were mad that Jesus wasn't fixing their problem. It was probably more, hey, we're kind of panicked here. Would you like to join our panic? What's wrong with you that you aren't panicked? We're going to die. Don't you care that this boat is about to go down? Don't you care that our lives are in danger? Your life is in danger? I would have, far be it from me to take the place of the inspired writer of Scripture and led by the Holy Spirit, but you know what I would have loved? I would have loved Jesus when they said, get up, aren't you afraid we're all going to die? You're going to die, we're going to die, get up, help us, panic with us, because that always helps. What I would have loved Jesus to respond to them when they woke him up, I would have loved for Jesus just to lift up his head when they said, don't you care we're about to die, that you're going to die? I would have loved Jesus to go, not so much. Because he knew. Roused from his sleep, he gets up. And there's two conversations that happen, two rebukes. One to the wind and the waves, and one to the disciples. Now, the clear order of that in the text is Jesus stands up and he rebukes the wind and the wave. And then he turns to his disciples. Again, I don't know what your image of Jesus is. Is this easy, comfortable, calm, cool, collected, always gentle, giving everybody hugs all the time kind of guy? But I'm telling you, the rebuke he gave his disciples was intense. He begins this. This is what he says to them. Modern translations, I'm not saying they've done it wrong, but they've tempered it a little bit. Because it doesn't fit, I think a little bit, because it doesn't fit our image of Jesus. Jesus goes, why are you a bunch of cowards? I mean, literally, he uses the word cowards. Now, I'm going to tell you, when the winds are blowing and the waves are breaking over and the ship is about to go down and I'm over the deepest part of the Sea of Galilee, and knowing myself, I'm already sick to my stomach. The last thing I want is somebody looking at me going, hey, coward, what's the matter with you? Pull the plug. How dare you? You know, now if the order had been reversed, if Jesus would have first got up and said, hey, you bunch of cowards, what's wrong with you? I'd have probably been like, hey, I'll tell you. And then until he said, hey, winds, be silent, and the winds went calm, I'd been like, do what you want. Not going to say what I was going to say. He speaks that word and the waters go calm. And then the disciples start going, who is this guy? And why? See, up until this moment, you know what they'd experienced with Jesus? Miracles, healings, deliverances, powerful teaching, multitudes, popularity, the inner circle. That's what they had experienced. They had seen other sick people healed. They had seen other afflicted individuals freed. They had seen all of that. But this was the first time that in following Jesus, they found themselves at risk themselves. See, it's okay and it's great to be in the crowd when miracles are happening. It's harder when you're in the boat and the waves are breaking over it and your ship's about to go down. See, it's easier to be in the multitude that's celebrating, and I'm sure they were tired, yes, and I'm sure they worked hard, yes, and I'm sure Jesus challenged them. But this appears to be the first moment that in following Jesus, they were at themselves at the point of a crisis. And it came upon them like that. This is how life is, right? I mean, this is how life is. We go along and we can have great experiences. We can be comfortable. We can be easy. We can even be working hard and seeing great things. And then suddenly, in a moment, the thing that I have found about pastoral ministry, it has put me to this reality over and over again, that moments matter and that in a second, somebody's life can change forever. In a moment you don't expect it, you didn't see it coming, suddenly something happens. And now it's no longer, hey, my life is easy or comfortable or I'm busy or I have the normal struggles of life. It's no longer somebody else's problem over there. Suddenly, in a moment, I am cast in the middle of the overwhelming breaking waves, catching me off guard. And now it's no longer somebody else's challenge. It's my own life crisis. A diagnosis. A financial collapse in your business. A relationship, a family member, a child. Something happens and your life changes. And I'm going to tell you, I'm uncomfortable. I just know myself. I wonder how I would have responded to Jesus when he, in the middle of the crisis, when my life was in danger, Jesus looked at the disciples and went, you bunch of cowards. I want him to give, I don't even like hugs. That's when I want a hug. I'd like to state for the record, I'm getting better about the hugging thing, okay? I'm working on it. He rebukes them. Why are you being cowards? How long will you not have faith? Let me sum it up for you right now. Jesus had done miracles. Miraculous, amazing things already that they were stunned to see. But when it came to their own moment of crisis, they weren't prepared to trust him when it was their crisis. They were very comfortable in the ease and the popularity and the celebration of other people's crises being fixed, or in the popularity of the multitudes gathering around. But when they encountered their moment of crisis, they weren't prepared to trust through their own crisis. See, there is this almost mutual exclusive struggle between faith and fear. They are not compatible. See, and I think, why was Jesus frustrated and why did Jesus strongly rebuke them? Because they had seen all of these other things. How could they not understand that he was going to take care of it now? See, that's why it's hard in the moment of the crisis to build your faith. You learn to grow in the walk from what God does in the everyday life, so that when the storm unaware comes upon you, you're prepared to trust him in that moment. The reason Jesus was frustrated is they had seen more than enough to secure their confidence in his care and provision, so that when the crisis came, they could have stood strong. That's what I want to challenge you to do. Whether you're in that crisis or whether you're just in the everyday life, don't forget to see what God is doing and understand that what he does in the normal moments can be sufficient when the crisis comes. And I promise you, listen, and I don't want to be the bearer of bad news and I don't want to hurt your feelings, but there will come crises. They will. They're going to happen. So you take those moments where you experienced his love, when you knew his forgiveness, when you experienced his provision, when there was a relationship that he brought into your life that was whole and healthy and good, when you sensed his presence in worship, when he answered a prayer that you offered, when you lived your life and his word spoke to the circumstance of your day, in the midst of the softer times, be ready and let those moments not go by without attention, but let them deepen and firm up the faith that as you walk through the easy times, when the moment of crisis, when the storm shows up when you didn't expect it, then you will have something hold on to, that when the waves start breaking over the boat, you don't go, Jesus, get up and panic with us, we're all going to die. No, there is a deep-seated confidence that the master of the seas, the one who speaks and the winds and the waves obey, he's in the boat. He's in the boat. And so this morning, whether you're in the crisis or whether you are on the days of celebration, the call is the same. Trust in him through it all. Bow your heads with me. I don't know how I would have responded to Jesus rebuking me in that moment when I felt like I had every reason to be afraid. I don't know what I would have said or done. I know I wouldn't have liked it. I know myself well. I wouldn't have liked it. But I would have needed to hear it. So this morning, I want to speak to two groups and we're going to pray. Number one, you're in the crisis. You're in the crisis. And I know, here's the thing, I'm your pastor. I know the crisis some of you are in. I know you got caught off guard. I know it's not what you expected. I know the crisis you're in. And some of you, I'm your pastor and I don't know because you keep it closer to your own heart, but you're in one of those crises moments. And you're afraid. I'll let Jesus speak the stronger words if necessary for you, but I'm going to speak the pastoral word to you. The master of the winds and the waves is in the boat, friends. He's in the boat. So this morning, are you here and you're in that crisis moment? It may be brand new this week. You may have been living it in the last couple years, but you're in a crisis moment. And at points you've been afraid. It's okay. We can be honest about it. I want to pray for you. Is there anyone here today? Say, that's me, Pastor. Yeah. It's just real. And you know, these hands that went up, I know some of your stories. I know some of what you're going through. All I can tell you is the master of the wind and the waves is still in the boat. And his calm is not an indication of his lack of power or his lack of concern. He just knows. He knows that he's got you in his hand. And then for the rest of you, you need to start looking and developing and nurturing trust in him when things are good. Don't neglect to count his provision, because you're going to need to remind yourself in a moment when the world is rocking around you, that he's still in control. So I want to pray for you today. Lord, in this room, those 10 who raised their hand, Lord, you know exactly what they need. Maybe a word. Maybe they need that strong word that says, hey, I've been there before. I've done this. I've taken care of you before. I've provided for you before. You've seen me do miracles in your life and in the lives of others. You've experienced my care, love, grace, and presence. You should know this by now. You should know this by now. And maybe there's somebody who needs to hear that. I want you to know, even a strong word is a word in love from Jesus. Or maybe you need the comfort. I know whatever you need today, the Lord can give that to you. To deepen faith in the midst of the storm. And then he speaks and changes the circumstance. Lord, do that in somebody's life today. Do that in somebody's life today. Those that are walking through the crisis, the storm, the uncertainty, in a moment their world changed and they didn't have an expectation of that. I pray right now that whether it be a strong word or a gentle word, speak the word that's necessary. And for everyone else, may each day of grace, each moment of provision, each word of truth, each gracious expression of your presence, may it build within us a faith that when the crisis comes, we need not fear. We need simply to trust. In Jesus' name, amen. Will you stand with me all across this room?